What's going on, everyone? Well, yesterday with the giant climate protest that was all over the world, except for the nations that actually caused the most pollution. Imagine that. They're not going to go into these type of go into China and try to sit there and protest. I don't think they'd take so kindly. But welcome to the world of eco-fascism, everyone. Let's just get into the story. Climate activist slams Greta Thunberg's totalitarian climate strike. On Friday, thousands mobbed New York City and other cities across the world, including Jakarta, Indonesia, Dunedin, New Zealand, as part of a climate strike organized by Swedish teen Greta Thunberg, a 16-year-old that has literally pretty much no experience in this field, except for recently. I think she read AOC's Green New Deal, the original one that was put out, because that's exactly what it sounds like. Yet Robert Koval, himself a believer in the necessity of fighting climate change, warned that the climate strike statements and ideas are fundamentally illiberal, fundamentally misguided, and unworkable. If we are going to save the planet, we need to unite behind the science. But that includes the science of economics, Koval, director of Britain's conservative think tank, the Center for Policy Studies, wrote in a long Twitter thread about Thunberg's movement. I've worked as a science journalist. I devoted an entire chapter of my book, The Great Acceleration, How the World is Getting Faster, to impact our faster lives, or to the impact our faster lives are having on the planet. I believe that climate change is a pressing and urgent problem, he explained. But this manifesto would make things worse. Most things called a manifesto makes things worse. When you actually refer to it as a manifesto, it's usually not a good thing. Just from my experience, whenever a manifesto is brought up, it's usually not talking about a good thing. Koval took a close look at the climate strike demands and came to the conclusion that they are actively anti-science. We've been seeing that a lot with these progressives, especially over the past few years. If you go to the Global Climate Strike website, link in the description, and look under What Are We Asking For, all the way at the bottom of the page, you will find these demands. Like I said, I'll put a link in the description, and you have to go all the way to the bottom of the page to find those, that section. Alrighty then. This isn't just about saving the planet, it's about climate justice, including reparations. And this presumably means that since Britain invented the Industrial Revolution and has bumped X millions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere since, it should pay Y% of the cost, he noted. But if you then follow the link that defines climate justice, you get taken to the people's demands. The people, in this case, being a coalition of left-wing global activist groups. So, yeah, a bunch of left-wing activist groups are going to muddy the waters pretty hard. But that's one thing I do like about those progressive type of activists. They muddy the water so bad that people literally stop caring. And it kind of just makes me happy. Koval suggested that if millions of people marching were told about them, I suspect they'd have a very different take. Koval started with the climate change strike goal of banning fossil fuels. He supported phasing out fossil fuels and claimed that decarbonizing the economy by 2050 would cost 1 trillion euros overall, about 33 billion euros per year, or 1.5% of the GDP. Yet Thunberg's climate strike demands a zero-carbon economy by 2030, which is impossible, which would be insanely expensive. In fact, pretty much just insane. It's impossible. We don't have the means of the infrastructure or even really the technology to do such a thing. Because they don't like nuclear power, they're very adamant that nuclear power is bad, even though it's like a net negative carbon emission. I just don't get it. I tried to look up how much extra it would cost to bring that forward by 20 years to 2030, but there are no reliable estimates because it would be insanely expensive and pretty much just insane. Robert Koval, September 20th, 2019. But it gets worse. The climate strikers don't just want to phase out carbon. They want to do that while solving all the history's injustices. This amounts to forcing an energy revolution with our hands tied behind our backs, Koval argued. The climate strike rejects what it calls false solutions, such as geoengineering, carbon capture and storage, techno-fixes, more broadly, carbon trading, biofuels, or bioenergy, and smart agriculture. Well, yeah, they pretty much are tying our hands behind our backs, because that would be a lot of little things that would be chipping away at the bigger problem. But no, they don't want that. And they definitely, like I said, they don't want nuclear, which nuclear would probably right now be the most feasible way to eliminate a lot of carbon. But they don't like that. They don't like that. Like I said, here's the list from his tweet. In other words, we cannot use market mechanisms, economics, or technology to cut carbon emissions. We need trees, not factories, he explained. Yet there are even more demands. The rejection of nuclear power, an instance on non-market approaches, the exclusion of corporations, and buzzwords like agroecology and food sovereignty. Well, why didn't y'all do this? All y'all kids got out of school yesterday. Most of them just to get out of school for a day. And why didn't y'all, instead of just standing around and spewing nonsense, why didn't y'all all decide to go plant a tree? You know, think about how many millions of people across the planet yesterday were sitting here protesting. Why didn't y'all, instead of just protesting, do, something active? Be an activist and actively try to get something done, like go plant trees. Just think of every single one of you kids that were out there skipping school to do this stupid climate protest. What if you were out there being proactive and actually planting trees or cleaning up something, picking up trash, doing something actually productive? Seems like work, doesn't it? Agroecology, when you look it up, involves the explicit focus on social and economic dimensions of the food system and strong focus on the rights of women, youth, and indigenous peoples. Interesting. It has a lot less to do with the climate, Koval wrote. Food sovereignty insists on culturally appropriate food markets rather than using boring things like price signals, marketing mechanisms, and comparative advantage to ensure that we maximize output. Culturally appropriate. What is, okay, in America, what's culturally appropriate, considering we have every culture from all over the world? What is culturally appropriate? That sounds like Representatives AOC, saying Hispanic people should grow yucca in New York City. Even though the climate is horrible for it, she dismissed scientific concerns about agriculture as rooted in colonialism. AOC's rejection of colonialist science also reminds me of the black student in South Africa who rejected the science for African black magic. Interesting. Talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. While European colonizers did abuse native peoples, this was a continuation of the tragic human experience. Conquest and slavery are as old as civilization. The new thing is limited government and free market economics. Americans experience a rich lifestyle literally unimaginable to the most powerful person even 200 years ago. If there is a climate emergency, the dynamism of the market will foster solutions. Immediately rejecting the market as inherently oppressive is a recipe for tyranny, poverty, and a surrender to the climate crisis, if there is one. Yeah, they keep saying the Earth is getting hotter. Show me the models that consistently show the Earth just steadily getting hotter. Because I've seen a lot of the models, and it's fluctuating. It goes up and goes down. It goes up. It's kind of like the there's the glaciers down there in Antarctica. They fluctuate, and now they've found that there's volcanic activity down there, so that could be why some of the glacier ice melts, because there's lava underneath them, because only certain sections are melting, while a lot of the sections, I would say a greater majority, is actually building ice. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Koval, who believes in the threat of the climate crisis, rightly warned that the Climate Strike Manifesto would make things worse because it's not asking what is the most cost-effective way to prevent or protect against climate change. Or indeed, how do we grow the maximum amount of food as cheaply as possible with minimum emissions? It is instead telling us that market mechanisms like carbon taxes, by overwhelmingly consensus, the mechanism favored by serious economists, I tell you what, have no place at all in fighting climate change, nor do drought-resistant crops or plants engineered to withstand seawater. Now that would be pretty fascinating, but I don't like human-engineered food. In my book, I diagnose what I call utopian authoritarianism. I swear, I just can't speak today. I can't speak most of the time, to be honest with you. The idea that the only way to save the planet is for people on the left to command others in the developed and developing world to live poorer, meaner lives, Colville explained. This totalitarian grasp for control justifies activists taking over every aspect of life in the name of advertising crisis and solving historic injustices. It is a recipe for power, and it is not a serious response to the threat of a climate crisis. Instead, it uses the alleged crisis as a tool to control others. And we see this time and time again from the left. They just want power. They want to control people. That's what they want. They want to be dictators. I disagree with Colville about the looming threat of a climate crisis. Alarmists have just botched far too many predictions for me to believe the hype. Remember the Maldives? But I nevertheless welcome alternatives to carbon-based energy if they can deliver the same amount of power at a cheaper cost. Nuclear power is particularly promising in this regard, and any serious solution to climate change must champion nuclear power. I agree with that statement fully. Greta Thunberg's climate strike movement is not serious. However, and Robert Colville explained why. The manifesto sounds quite similar to the Green New Deal. It's almost a carbon copy. A project so impossible that taxing the rich at 100% would still fall trillions short. In a movement of candor, AOC's former chief of staff, Saikat Chakrabarty, admitted that the Green New Deal wasn't originally a climate thing at all. He asked an ally, do you guys think of it as a climate thing? Because we really think of it as a how do you change the entire economy thing. It was a way to promote socialism. And yeah. But my big thing is, why are we sitting here listening to a 16-year-old who literally doesn't know anything about climate change? All she's done is recycle the same complaints as people like Al Gore, when they've been proven consistently wrong. Consistently wrong. Every time they make up a timeline, it's completely wrong. It's false. You know, and we still don't quite fully grasp the science of climate, I don't think. I truly don't think that. Because in the 70s, it was global cooling was the problem. And then since the 70s, it's been global warming, because global cooling didn't pan out. It didn't work. So they said, well, it's not getting colder. Let's say it's getting hotter. And when you look at the actual number of how much the climate's increased, it's like 0.0 something, you know, it's so small, fractionally small, that really it's not this giant cloud looming over us like they want to portray it. It's just not. Yes, I do think we should do whatever humanly possible we can do to make sure our environment is great. I'm a hunter, I'm a fisher, I'm a gardener. I like outside. Outside is where I prefer to be. But I also don't think that people, especially Western nations, are causing the biggest problems, because we're not. We are just not. I don't know if there's even a big Western nation that's on the top 10 worst polluting list. I'm not fully sure. I'd have to re-go over that. The biggest ones I can think of right now are China. It would be China, India, and parts of Africa are absolutely horrible when it comes to pollution. Welcome to Eco-Fascism, people. It's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets any better, because these people deny accurate science. They deny positive ways. They refuse to go along with positive ways that we can start affecting this now by nuclear power and stuff like that. They always talk about solar and wind, but what are the carbon footprint? What's the carbon footprint of building a solar panel? It's pretty high. It's actually extraordinarily high. I'm not so sure about the wind turbines, but they have their own problems also, like consistency. But I'd love to hear your comments. And kids, stay in school. If you want to really truly help the environment and skip school doing it, go out and plant trees, plant grass, plant stuff. Add more green to the planet. Because if we also go by a lot of these activist things, we shouldn't eat meat no more. And if the whole world's going to be on a plant-based diet, guess what? We're going to need a whole lot more plants, because we're going to strip all the plant life. All the vegetation is going to be stripped because we have to feed a planet with it. Think about that also when you want to get rid of meat. Meat is important. It's not only important for our health, but it is important to our environment. A lot of meat-eating animals, or a lot of animals we eat for meat, they eat grass, and the grass grows back better. And they poop out fertilizer to make the grass grow back even better. Come on. Sustainability. So sustainability, and just, we can make everything better with what we got. We don't have to constantly take things away. Remember that. We can always make our technology work for us better without taking things away. Stop trying to change our lives. Stop trying to dictate our lives. As always, like, share, and subscribe. I will catch y'all on the flip side.